In terms of keeping bees, first off, bees are awesome. It's this weird thing where once you start keeping bees, you have somehow unlocked the secrets of the universe and you can see the world in a different way. And if you think about, at least in my history, you were taught to just run away from these little yellow stingy things. And once you become a beekeeper, your first thing is to lean in and look and measure. And it's just awesome. Every year, it feels like I say it's a really tough time for beekeepers and bees in general. We have had massive losses last year. Commercial hives lost upwards of 80% of their population because of varroa mite and other issues that are coming. It's hard and it's tough. And so to have other beekeepers managing hives in a smart way, it's really beneficial for all of us. What I also want to do here is try and talk you out of beekeeping because it is a commitment. The first question is, are you allergic? You are going to get stung. It is going to hurt and it will be your fault. Just know that going forward. Whatever you do, there's always going to be a moment where your gloves aren't on right, your veil's not on it the right way. It's something that will happen. Now, there's some research that came out last year. If you get stung a certain number of times, you may develop the full allergic reaction where you need an EpiPen. But there is also a threshold to what if you get stung enough, you will develop an immunity to bee sting. That number is about 200 stings in a year and you'll be immune. Knowing your neighbors. If you don't know your neighbors and you add a hive, you will learn about them soon enough. Just know, do I have a next door neighbor who is allergic to bee stings or will feel threatened by them? And there are a lot of things you can do to mitigate that as well. So when a bee flies, the bee will fly, and if it encounters an obstacle, it will go up and it will go straight over. So if you have a fence and you want to put it 7 feet, it will hit the fence, it will go up 7 feet, and it will fly directly across their yard. So if that's a worry, the bees coming in and out, there are ways to mitigate that. The other thing I love is really honey diplomacy. A pint of honey just shows up on someone's door will mean the world to them. So it's another way to know your neighbors on a good way. Time and space. Keeping bee does take time. You should be inspecting your colony at least every other week, depending on the time of year it is. During the high honey flow or the nectar flow, you'll want to probably do that weekly. During the dearth and periods like that, it might be every other week. And then the winter might be once a month. But it does actually require that time. And so if you think about where your hives are, is it in a place that you can access so that you can do an inspection? And an inspection in an ideal world lasts much less than 15 minutes. There is a time commitment and there's also a space commitment. So what I recommend for people getting started in beekeeping is to actually get 3 hives. I used to say 2, but when you have 3 hives that you're managing, you can see sort of who's the odd one out. And here's the other one. Bee people are weird. I just want to emphasize that. And then you will become the bee guy / bee gal of your neighborhood. But it is an emotional roller coaster. Average honeybee lives about 28 days. Queen bee, upwards of 3 years. You have 3 types of bees. The queen is only one. Sometimes some hives, you can get 2 queens at one time. The queen's role is to 1, lay eggs, and 2, emit a pheromone that helps coalesce the colony and provide guidance on what to do. So should it be looking for pollen because we need to lay more eggs? Should it be collecting nectar because we want to get our stores ready for winter? Or a weird guy in a white suit who's opening the hive, we should sting him. So she communicates through pheromone to coalesce the hive. The drone bee, that's the male bee. It makes up a very small percentage of the hive. And the drone is there to pass on the genetics. So it does no work. It doesn't even feed itself. It takes all the resources from the rest of the hive and it goes out to try and find other queen to pass on the genes. And in the wintertime, the first thing the workers do is they drag all the drones out and just take them out and then throw them to their death because they can't feed themselves. They've never been outside the hive. When talking about it, like the drones they kind of have no role. And when a hive is failing, the workers, which we'll talk about in a second, they're the other female bees, they can lay eggs and all of those eggs are unfertilized. So they will end up being drone bees. So one way you can spot a failing hive is you have nothing but drones and it's just making drone after drone after drone, which has traditionally been a sign of a failing hive. But I was talking to an entomologist a short time ago And their perspective was very different. It was like that's actually their last chance to pass on the genes of the hive. So they're creating as many drones as they can so that those drones can go out and hopefully pass on the genetics to the hive. And then we have the worker bees, and the worker bees are, as the name suggests, they're the workers. Depending on how old they are, we'll get to that slide in a second, they have different tasks from being nurse bees, helping out the younger bees, to building honey, building wax, and then eventually they become either scouts or foragers. So in terms of the life cycle, this is a little illustration I see a lot, but I found a very cool 3D version of it where you can see how the bees develop over time. So the queen, this is her. She's a little larger than the other bees. And again, she has two roles: lay eggs and secrete a pheromone to tell the other bees what to do. In terms of laying eggs, she can lay up to 1,500 eggs a day. The period like right now is the nectar flow, where if you're sneezing, it's a good sign for bees because there's a lot of stuff in the air right now. There's a lot of pollen. There's a lot of nectar. So she's going to be laying about 1,500 eggs in a year. So we talked about the little queen cells. You can see here on the illustration, they kind of look like little peanuts, and those are new queens that are being grown. And that's how a hive reproduces, is we'll develop new queen cells, and then half of the hive will separate, with the original queen will go out, and then the new queen will stay in the hive. So that's the way it reproduces. It reproduces as a hive. If you're buying bees, you'll often get the option of a marked queen or an unmarked queen. It's basically a little dab of paint that is put on the queen, and that tells you what year that queen is from. It's 2026 right now, so white is the dot that you would see on the back of a queen. It does a couple things for you. Is it makes it really easy to see the queen because you're just looking for that dot of paint. And then if you look in and see a queen that is not marked, you know that you've had a swarm that you missed. And then the worker bees, we mentioned they have different jobs, and the job is based on their age. So in the first 3 days, once they emerge from their cells, first job is to clean out their original bedroom. It's really not until week 3 that bees actually leave the hive. And those are your foragers and your scout bees. And those are the bees that you're going to see in nature. The main way that they communicate is through pheromones. The other thing that is totally cool is they do a thing called a waggle dance. And so a bee will go out and find a resource and come back to the hive, and it will share a bit of that, be it pollen or nectar, with the other bees. And then it will align itself inside the hive based on where the sun is. And it will start to waggle, and it will walk in one direction. It will make a circle, and it will continue that little dance. And they're conveying to the other bees what the resource is. Like there's a huge patch of clover over here, and depending on how far they go, it will tell them within 3 feet of where that resource is. And depending on how strong the waggle is, it will tell them how large that source is. So the bees will come and communicate to each other where the resources is, and they do it through the waggle dance. And also, we talk about swarms. When a hive is ready to reproduce, half the hive goes away, and they meet up in a location. When you watch cartoons with swarms, that's what it is. It's a bunch of bees sitting like in a tree on a log. And so they're sitting there looking for their new home. And so they're going to send these scout bees out in various directions to see if they can find a new place for the swarm to their home. And those bees will come back, and they will convey the information to the rest of the hive. Like, it's this far off the ground. Inside is this big. This is the way the location is facing. And they will convey those pieces of information to the other bees. And those bees will send additional scouts to take other measurements, come back and convey that information. And then the bees as a whole get together and they vote. And the bees do not move into their new location until all of the bees in a swarm are in agreement. So if I haven't talked you out of it yet, hopefully we can talk about how to become a beekeeper. We'll talk about a bit of the equipment. We'll do a little show and tell, and then setting up your hive. So as a beekeeper, your real goal in life is to do as little as possible. The bees know what they want. They know what they need. And so it's really for you to step back and allow them to grow naturally. I say that also, we were talking about the historic colony losses. We have a real issue with varroa mite. There's another tracheal mite that's right on the edge of getting introduced to the US. So we need to test for varroa. We need to treat for varroa. And if you're not doing that, you're putting your bees at risk, and you're putting the bees within a 3-mile radius at risk as well. So you want to also manage the hives for honey productivity. Again, the way bees naturally reproduce is to swarm, and they swarm because their hive gets too small, they've outgrown it, or they produce too many resources, so it's time to move on. They are going to swarm. As a beekeeper, you can take a split, so you can split the hive, so you now have 2 smaller hives. Equipment overview. To be a beekeeper, you need a couple things. You need a bee suit. This one is mine. In addition to that, we've got gloves. The other key is this. This is called a hive tool, and this is what you use to open up a hive and pull out the individual frames. So the other keys here is the smoker, and this is a little thing. It opens up, and you fill it with any number of materials. My favorite is pine straw because it is freely available, and it makes a beautiful smoke. You light that on fire, and it's got a little bellow here, and smoke will come out. What this does, talked about their main form of communication is through pheromone. And the smoke does 2 things. One, it messes with their ability to communicate with each other, since they're then covered with that smoke smell. And then 2, it tells them there's a forest fire somewhere nearby, so we all need to go. So they change their activity from protecting a hive to getting ready to possibly have to swarm because there's a forest fire. So it calms the bees, and it changes their communication pattern. So a smoker is your key tool. Types of hives. The main hive is something called a Langstroth hive. And that's the standard beehive that you will see. Feeders throughout the year, you need to really judge what's going on in the environment. Are they getting enough resources, or do you need to supplement the resources? So it's as simple as having a thing with sugar water inside the hive where they can make additional resources to get them through the winter. And then a varroa test kit, which is a little almost like a mason jar where you can test for varroa. For me, this is no longer optional. We're in a really rough place where testing and treatment is now what I consider mandatory. Where to get the equipment? Unfortunately, most of the equipment sellers are online, so there's not a lot of beekeeping stores you can go to. There's actually one just outside DC you can go to, but you'll have to go to some of the online retailers or one of the beekeeping conferences or conventions. Man Lake is really one of the biggest, and I used to recommend a lot of smaller beekeeping companies, but Man Lake just keeps buying them out. They're out of Pennsylvania, and again, not an endorsement, but most likely to probably get your stuff from either Man Lake or Dayton. When it comes time to get your bees, where will you get them from? I always recommend finding a local source of bees. Here on the Eastern Shore, Beekeepers Club, every year, they bring in a whole bunch of bees in packages and nukes to supply to local beekeepers. So you have 2 options when you buy bees. Is you can buy what is called a package of bees, which is literally a box. I don't have one here, a box about yay big, that contains 3 to 5 pounds of live bees, a queen, and some sugar water. And you can order those from Man Lake and other online retailers. Other thing is called a nuke or nucleus colony. And that, we said before, most beehives are 5 to 10 frames or 8 to 10 frames. A nuke is a little 5-frame mini beehive that has a queen, that has all the bees, that has honey, that has pollen, and other resources. And so you're just taking like a pre-built hive and putting it into your hive. If this is something that interests you, now would be a really good time to partner with one of the local groups and really see what to expect, because it's not until like January or so that you should start ordering your bees, getting your hive set up. I think it's a little late right now to get started this year, but it's the perfect time to get some experience and start planning. Here on this side of the bridge, Lower Eastern Shore Beekeepers Association, here at UMES, feel free to give me a call. I will end my part here, but I am open to questions.